Notice is hereby given that a regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Sandy Oaks, Texas is being held today, Thursday, July 11th, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. at Sandy Oaks City Hall located at 4451 Hickory Haven, Sandy Oaks, Texas 78112, for the purpose of considering the following agenda items. All items are subject to action. Ms. Shelton, will you do a call to order, please? Our quorum call, sorry.
Alderman Tremblay.
Here.
Alderman Garcia.
Here.
Alderman Walker.
Here.
Alderman Thomasini.
Here.
And Alderman Martino.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Great, thank you. All stand, please, for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 3 on the agenda is citizens to be heard. This item allows the public to address the City Council on issues affecting the community and the city. Please note that the Texas Open Meetings Act prohibits the City Council from responding, commenting, or discussing items or topics during this portion of the meeting that are not included on the agenda. This item will be open for up to 30 minutes, with 3 minutes to each speaker. If there are more than 10 speakers, each will be given 10 minutes. And we have nobody. Okay, financial report. The finance income and expenses will be reported by City Clerk Catherine Yelton and possible discussion.
Thank you. We had a beginning balance at June 1st, 2019 of $631,907.19. Checks and payments of $202,584.09. Deposits and credits of $19,858.63. We did have a couple of uncleared transactions that were $114.10 positive. So our ending balance as of June 30, 2019 is $449,295.83.
And the deposit here from the State Comptroller on June 14th, that's the one that included the additional funds? Is that correct, the $6,500?
No, that was the
I don't have that in front of me. I knew that we got a,
I thought that was less.
was that July?
I thought that was
Hold on, I've got them all right here. No, you're right. No, it's June 14th, I think.
What was,
The last one that's posted on here. I think that's the number. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions or concerns or comments on this? This includes also the purchase of the Impala for the Marshal's office and the 50% deposit on the animal control facility.
and the $125,000 that went to
The investment pool. Yeah. Okay. No other questions? Okay, item 5, announcement of November 2019 general and special election and candidate filing. So on June 20th, we had to post the notice for the upcoming election, so that was done. We have 4 positions on the City Council that are going to be up for election. Positions 1, 3, and 5. So in odd number years, it's the odd numbered positions. And then in even number years, it's even numbered the positions 2 and 4 and the mayor. So we have actually 4 positions on the ballot for this November. And you're number 1? Okay. And Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry. Who's number 3?
Me 5.
You're 5.
Mr.
I'm
Rapinoe's
3.
Mr. Rapino is 3. And then Ms. Walker is serving an unexpired term, so she would be up for re-election. That's position 4. Is that correct? Okay. So applications and the forms and everything that are needed are on the website. Are they on the website today?
They are.
Okay. The time for submitting applications is July 20th is the first day. They can be accepted through August 19th. They can be mailed in. They can be hand delivered, as long as they are within that time frame. I would encourage anyone that's interested to please sign up and jump in the pool. The water's warm. Plenty of room.
I have a question. So it's jumped from August 1st to the 19th? Because remember, in past, we had to turn it in by August 1st.
Turn what in?
The applications to run for city council?
No, it's July 20th
Okay,
through August 19th
okay. So
is the
August
first and the last
19th
day.
Is the deadline?
Is the
to turn it in.
deadline, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, any other questions on that? Okay, consent agenda item 6. All matters listed under consent agenda are considered routine by the City Council of the City of Sandy Oaks and will be enacted by one motion. There will not be separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. So we have 2 items on here, minutes from June 13th regular meeting and minutes from the June 27th regular meeting.
I'll move to accept the consent agenda if there's no discussion.
Okay, we have a motion by Alderman Rapino to approve the consent agenda as presented. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
I don't have this 27th.
You don't have the 20?
Yeah, it's.
Oh, they're in here
They're
together.
front and back.
Yeah, they're not.
Right,
separated.
see back here?
Stuff's
next
in
one.
the back and-
I know. Conserving paper. So we have a second by Alderman Thomasini. Can I get a show of hands of those in favor, please? Okay, that's unanimous.
Was it Thomason or
It was, stop. It was Thomasini. See, I'm not the only one. I'm going to move to item 8G. I'm sorry, 7G. This is discuss and or possible action on procedures for withdrawal from the Via Metropolitan Transit Authority and or repeal of the tax. So back in November of 2014, some of you may remember that we had a vote on the ballot to approve abolishing the Via tax at that time. And the voters, it wasn't an overwhelming, but there was a majority that said that they wanted to keep the Via tax in place. So Alderman Tremblay and myself at the time had, send that down there to them. At that time, we started working with Via, having meetings with Via, trying to get some service for the money that was being collected out here. And I will tell you that the MTA tax for unincorporated Bexar County, which included us at the time and still includes us today, they have been taxing us for 40 years and providing no services. So we worked really hard to get in front of people to hopefully get some services delivered out here. It's not happening. I even had another conversation with them a couple of weeks ago, and we're not even on the radar screen. So that is a 0.5% sales tax that is being collected that could be used in our city as opposed to sending it to Via. So the discussion, what I gave you here, this is October 1 through April 30th of 2019. And it shows the various components of the tax structure. So overall, the tax is 8.25%. The state gets 6.25% of that right off the top. The city's only getting 1.5% in sales tax, and VIA was getting 0.5%. And so, based on these numbers, plus what we know that we have received in sales tax revenues, we were able to back into what the value of the MTA tax is. And just through April, so we still have May, June, July, August, 5 more months, it's already over $19,000 in tax that's been collected. So the plan is to put it back on the ballot. This would be the first year, we think it's the first year, we're still trying to make sure that that's exactly the right time, but they told us it would be 5 years to bring that money back into the city as opposed to still giving it to VIA. This is the first opportunity we'll have to repeal that. And the intent from that, you know, we have a number of options to use that money for. Ken Roberts and I have had discussions on a couple of different things. One would be an economic development corporation that would work to stimulate commercial growth and bring more sales tax. You spend a little money, you get more money. Dedicating some of it maybe for streets, maybe dedicating it for some other purpose. So we can talk about what to do with it should we get to that point where we're going to abolish that tax. So that's the reason for that item on the agenda. Is there any discussion on that? Anyone have any other questions on it?
If not, I'll move to place that question on the ballot on November 5th.
Okay, so we have a motion by Alderman Rapino to proceed with the withdrawal from the VIA Metropolitan Transit Authority from our tax structure. Do we have a second on that?
I'll second it.
Alderman Garcia has seconded. Can I get a show of hands of those in favor? Okay. And Ms. Ortiz, you'll work through the particulars of what's needed from us to
Yeah, we still have to order the election for the, and so that will be
Part of
probably
the-
at the later July meeting or August meeting with
perfect.
the other November 2019 general election.
Okay, perfect. Okay, let's go back to, we have a guest speaker, so I'd like to bring up on item 7E. And I know on the original agenda, it did say Mary McLenny, McLeany, but it is truly Mark. So we weren't trying to be deceptive in any way. I think that was just a typo. So the item reads, presentation from Mark McLeany with Samco regarding city street repairs with possible discussion and/or action.
Thank you.
My name's Mark McLeany, and I'm with Samco Capital Markets. We're financial advisors for cities. Our office is in San Antonio. We represent many in this area, including Elmendorf, Pleasanton, Poteet, Jourdanton, Lytle, then going up to Ken's old neck of the woods, Selma, Church, New Braunfels. We tend to work with municipalities other than City of San Antonio, City of Dallas, Fort Worth, and the large ones. So I'm really glad to be here. Enjoyed I got here a little bit early. I drive up and down. I have a little property near Pleasanton, and I drive up and down 37 forever. And I've never come in on the drive and spent some time driving around, seeing how pretty this is with the hills and the oak trees, and really a bit of a gem that's probably not really identified by many people that live in and around San Antonio. So I commend you on for getting the city going and created and making it a home for y'all, because it is a beautiful little place. Ken asked me, he said that you're all starting to have some discussions about the possibility of some projects that are larger than what you can finance on a year in and year out basis. Cities, just like homes, homeowners, people that go have to buy a car, often can't just purchase the car, the house, without getting a loan. The state legislature gives cities the ability to borrow money through the statutes that they've created, and we're going to go through a couple of those options that a city has if they decide they need to borrow. So I'm not going to speak to the need for the project. I'm going to make you all, that's your business decision with your staff saying, yes, we need to borrow money. We can't get where we want to be without getting a larger amount of money. So that's a business decision. But what options do cities have to borrow money? So I put together a little bit of this chart, or this presentation. The first option that cities have are general obligation bonds. General obligation bond is a bond that has to have an election of the voters. It is, we only have 2 times a year to call an election. It's either November or May. And in order to call the election in November, you have to call it by mid-August. Call it in a May election, it's going to be done in February. It will say what the project is. The city, yes or no, the city would like to borrow X amount for street improvements. And your citizens will vote either yes or no. If an election fails, for 2 years, you can't come back and do it. So you have to wait at least 2 years. It's secured by ad valorem tax, so it would be part of your tax rate. And I've got a second handout that we'll go over briefly once we get through these financing options. Your tax rate's divided into 2 separate categories. One is maintenance and operation, M&O. That covers everything that you are all now operating under. If a city has debt, it's an INS tax, interest and sinking fund tax. Interest and sinking is a debt service tax that can only be set high enough to cover the debt service. You've probably seen what the state legislature was trying to do and what they approved for next year that limits your ability to raise revenues on the maintenance and operation side. This year you could go up to 8% or $500,000, which is not, and the next year it's 3.5%. And so they're restraining it. That's all on the M&O side. If your voters or if the city council authorizes the issuance, it's on the INS side, and so you get your M&O tax the way you always calculate it, and then whatever's needed for the INS, because the voters approved it, you add it on to that tax rate. So it is going to be supported, if you decide to do it, by taxes. It's usually done to pay for general improvements, streets, city hall, parks. It can be used to purchase a fire truck, fire station. What would be general purpose? It's not tied into utility systems. Could be drainage. But again, the voters would, under general obligation bond, have the right to turn it down. It's a simple majority to have it passed. Bond elections cost money. Typically, we suggest that the bond lawyers, and unfortunately it's not done by city attorneys, it's specified bond attorneys that will work with the city attorney to get it done. They typically charge $15,000. We are not bond attorneys. We're financial advisors. We help get you the money, but we do have to work with the bond attorneys to make sure that the bond election is called. Every bond that's authorized by cities goes to the Attorney General of the state of Texas and gets their approval also. And those bond attorneys are the ones that run those traps also. The second type of bond that we'll go through is a revenue bond. And I don't have your finances. Do you have water and sewer system? 2 types of revenue bonds: utility system revenue bonds. Well, 3 types: sales tax revenue bonds, and there's now drainage utilities. We're not even going to go through those because it's probably not one of the methods that you all are talking about, but it is an option for cities to use if they have a revenue stream tied to some sort of utility or sales tax.
So the MTA tax that we just talked about,
We've done EDC sales tax revenue bonds, Economic Development Corporation sales tax revenue bond. Because we're talking, I did a quick calculation, if you annualize that money, it'd be roughly $35,000 a year. You're really going to struggle issuing any bonds with a $35,000 annual debt service. So I wouldn't recommend it. I'd rather see you all use the $35,000 as a stepping stone to bring in more business, or use it for street repairs. If you do a street repair, that's $35,000 that can only be used for existing streets. So it's an extra set of money that can use not through bonds, but just as pay-as-you-go for streets, and it can't be used for new streets. It has to be for your existing streets. And at $35,000, that would probably be a real good thing for steel coating, chips, and that. But that's, again, that's a business decision for you all to make. I don't think I'd recommend using a sales tax revenue bond if your revenue stream's $35,000.
what would be an acceptable revenue stream?
Well, I'd probably suggest up north of $100,000.
Okay.
And give you an idea, $35,000, sales tax revenue bond doesn't tie to your ad valorem tax. It's solely by revenue generating by businesses.
Right.
At $35,000 a year, too many investors, we're not the investors, we're the advisors, too many investors would say, what happens if the Valero shuts down?
Right.
And that's too much of a risk. We're going to charge you 6% instead of 3.5%. And then you don't get to borrow as much money. So when you have 100,000 and you have 30 businesses, then all of a sudden, if one shuts down, you're not in sex jeopardy. The investors cannot, with a sales tax revenue bond, get to your taxes. And that's why it's riskier. That's why you need more volume to be able to, in my opinion, do an economic development bond efficiently.
Okay.
The next, and this is something that is used probably by most cities, but by no means is it the only avenue. Certificates of obligation. Certificates of obligation end up to be the same thing as a general obligation bond, supported by ad valorem taxes. However, you don't have the election of the voters, but you do have the say of the voters. And I'm going to go into that because you've got a lot of people here. It is not an attempt to circumvent the voters. It's an attempt to avoid wasting $15,000 in calling a bond election. It is not meant to circumvent. And I'll tell you why. Ken will know this man. The man that trained me, Tom Anderlich, who's since passed away, wrote the Certificate of Obligation Act of 1971. They purposely set the referendum number so low that if it was a problem, a referendum could be easily set. It's 5% of the qualified voters, not registered voters. So it's a small number. So what is a certificate of obligation? No election is required, but the voters retain the right of referendum. City Council must adopt a notice of intention resolution. That notice of intention resolution says City Council intends to borrow blank amount of money for street improvements or for park improvements, whatever the business decision is. We publish that notice in your legal paper, and now with the new legislation, we put it in the website and get the information to your voters. It's subject to petition. If 5% of the registered voters or qualified voters take it and submit a petition, it automatically goes to an election. Sales can be sold. Now, this is the current law. It says 30 days after the first publication. After September 1st, it's 45 days. So that is effective September 1st. new law that was put in this past year on the legislation gives 45 days, which again is more time to get the public informed. And if the public has a problem with it, it's not simple majority like a general obligation bond. It's 5%. They petition you, or they just talk to you and say, look, we don't want this. Then you just call an election. But it is a way to avoid $15,000 of costs, and that's why I bring it up. It's supported by ad valorem taxes, allows the city to finance multiple projects if there's multiple projects with one source of bonds. And I say that a general obligation bond, you have to have a proposition that says, if it's multiple propositions, $200,000 for parks, $800,000 for streets, $400,000 for City Hall, and I'm just making up numbers.
Right.
And each one of those is a yes or no question. On a certificate of obligation, you say in your notice, I'm not sure if those three numbers I added up to $1.2 million, the city intends to borrow $1.2 million for streets, City Hall, and parks. And so it's you can lump them together. Both GO bonds, all three, GO bonds, revenue bonds, and certificates of obligation can be sold with a 30-year maturity. We don't recommend going 30 years on things that don't have a life of
Right.
30 years, but you can go 30 years. If you were buying land for a city park, we're going to have that park for more than 30 years. Finance it for 30 years like you might a home. If you're doing it for streets or a police car, you don't want to finance it for 20 years if it's only going to be
Right.
used for 15 years or
Okay.
before you have to put more money into it. So those are, again, things we'll walk through if this is a decision that you all want to go through.
Okay.
The other item or the next option is tax notes. Tax notes are often used for equipment. There's no right of referendum for the voters, and it is done by a motion of the city council. It is for short-term items, equipment. Again, we often do them for 5 or 6 or 8 police cars for a city. Might do park equipment. Might do things that looks like you could pay for them in 1 year, but it'd be a lot easier on your budget to spread it out over 4 or 5 years. And so tax notes are done. The Attorney General and the state legislature believes that's a short-term financing mechanism, and that's why they did not give the right of referendum. But it's a business decision, and we remind you that voters do have right of referendum on you as a council. If you do a tax note and they told you not to do a tax note either directly or indirectly, they can vote you out. So that's the 4 main types of financings. Now, very quickly, pros and cons. Pros, voters on a general obligation, voters have a direct say in all of these, but particularly in a general obligation bond. They have them without the tax note. They have a way to force you with a CO, and then if you take it to them on election, they have the right to stop it. Cons, it's more costly to hold a bond election. Projects are turned down at a bond election, cannot come back for 2 years, and it takes some lead time, which is not necessarily always a problem, but if you need to be buying park equipment now, and we can't have the election until November, it takes more lead time, or if you're having the election in May. Pros and cons of certificates of obligation. We see they're less costly than issuing because there's no election cost. Cheaper than issuing revenue bonds because there's less restrictive bond covenants. There's a quicker process. Certificate of obligation, you could basically, if you said move now, we could have money in about 90 days. In a general obligation bond, we have to meet that election in November and then have a 30-day contest period. And then about 30 days later, you sell the bonds and you have money. So I would say if you moved fast on a GO bond and had an election in November, we'd be selling in February or March. So much quicker to do a CO. Multiple projects can be lumped in on a CO versus a GO bond. Cons, voters, we're not getting the full input that we would in a general obligation bond election. Voters are made aware of the city's intention to sell the debt, but they retain the right of referendum. And there's a very low threshold, which could be a pro, but it doesn't take much to stop it if that's the method you're going. Then I also put there potential public perception that you're circumventing us. We're the voters. You can come ask us. Well, you're not asking us, are we as a council circumventing them? It can be a political issue. So that's the main financing tools for cities. Now, I put together a quick, and this is, I'll go through it. I actually noticed I put my dad's birthday on top instead of today's birthday, but I'll let me hand it too. But it's July 14th is my father's birthday. So I wasn't thinking when I was putting in the date. As this gets around, I'll talk through it a little bit. So I went out, I had some conversations. Ken said there's no set plan on anything, but we had talked some $800,000, and I reached out to $1 million. So I have no idea, except this is something that you can use as a tool to kind of get an idea of what it might cost someone. So I did a random $800,000 to start with. But if you look at the far left, your current operation tax and your total tax rate right now is 23 cents, 23.8 cents. You don't have an INS tax.
Right.
Again, we kind of went through briefly the M&O and the INS and how if you add this, it is not part of your rollback calculations. We're a new city. Look on the upper right. I've done the taxable values. You've gone from 91 million in tax year 2015 to 125 million. You can see I put a 2019 estimate, question mark, question mark, question mark, and then I put 10% over on the far right-hand column. If you look in the bigger box on the left, I took it 10% is 137 million. The mayor handed me tonight what the preliminary values from the state are. It's at 148 million. They will not become final until July 25th. So that is preliminary, and don't hold those numbers. So use my 137 that I'm using, but think that we're going to come in better than 137, probably not as high as 148, because the difference, there's protests still going on those values.
Right.
So I think my 137 would be a worst case scenario that I show here in the second column down on the box on the left. 148 million, if it does come in, is 18% growth from last year. So that's a big, big number. Using the 10% growth of 137 million, if you borrowed $800,000 for 20 years, the required tax rate increase to cover that is 4 cents. What is 4 cents to a property here? I don't know what the average property value is after exemptions. Because I know you all have some exemptions, I know that. But let's just, for ease of math, if after exemption the average property is worth $100,000 on the tax rolls, not what I want to sell it for, but what it's on the tax roll, that's $40 a year. If the value, of course, is $80,000, then it's $32 a year, and so forth. 120, it would be $50 a year, or $48 a year. So, I mean, we can run those numbers and get more details as you all start making decisions. But if you went $800,000 for 20 years, your tax rate increase for the debt would cover 4 cents. I took it, what happens if you wanted $1 million for 20 years? It takes it to 5.1 cent, roughly, maybe 4.8, depending on what's going on. And I say depending on what's going on, as your value increases, your tax rate for the debt service has to decrease. So if you continue getting a 10% growth rate for 3 or 4 or 5 years, your INS tax rate will start at 5 cents, then it will go to 4.5, and then it will go to 4, and it'll keep working its down, because you can only set the INS tax rate high enough to cover the debt service. You cannot have surplus in INS. It can only be used for debt service. I also, because I don't like financing things that have, for 20 years, that don't have an average life of 20 years. So if the project happened to be something you only want to fund for 15 years, I did not run that on the paper, but roughly speaking, an $800,000 would take an extra penny. It would take it to about 5 cents. $1 million would take it by about an extra penny by shortening it by 5 years. So it would be 5 cents for 800,000 roughly, 6 cents for $1 million. There are some things that we can do to, if you all say we are comfortable planning for, if we get 18% this year, 10% growth next year, and maybe 10% growth the next year, and then we're going to stop. Because I don't like projecting out multiple years, because it doesn't always keep growing.
Right.
And if you say we're comfortable, we could put some structure into it, meaning we pay a little bit of principal, we delay a few years of the total principal payment, and you might grow into it. So we might be able to work with it and structure and say, we're comfortable doing $1 million if we can keep it at 5 cents. But we also think we need to be at 15 years, not 20 years. Well, I'd get with Ken and then come back with you with more numbers. So this is how we could do that. We can't push principal. We'd have to pay some principal each year to start reducing the loan, but we could get it paid off in 15 years with slightly increasing debt service over a few years. And then we'd want to plateau it, because I don't know where we're going to be 5 years with growth. We may get 12% growth for the next 10 years, but I don't want to bank on it, because if you bank on it and it doesn't come, then you're taking money out of the M&O to pay for the debt service.
Right.
Where do we get the investors?
That's what our job, great question, as financial advisor, what we do is we would put together bid form and go out to the market and get them.
What would a city our size and our ilk, what would their bond rating be?
We wouldn't get for this size, we wouldn't get a bond rating. We would sell them non-rated, because it wouldn't be good enough to take to the market. We are selling $24 million for Medina County. Their bond rating is a AA-. We're selling them a week from today, and we're projecting a 3% interest rate.
What would you think our interest?
If you look at the bottom of this, I estimated it at 4%.
Okay, yeah.
So your investor is going to say, this is a new city, they've never borrowed before, it's small, and we need a little extra interest rate. I wouldn't want it, a bond rating costs about $15,000 to get. That's hard to spread over $1 million. So there are buyers out there that understand Texas market and looks for non-rated bonds, and that's the market we would go to. 2 years ago, we sold for Medina County also $2 million on a tax note to prepare them for this $24 million. We didn't get a bond rating, and we sold it to local banks. So that's where that would be the typical market for something like this. Pleasanton, a couple weeks ago, sold an $8 million. They have a AA bond rating because of their sales tax, because of their size, because of their longevity. They were at like 3.25% interest rate. So 4% is an attractive rate, and if you compare it to historical numbers, the 10-year Treasury bond is a 2% investment. Now, you talked about, Catherine, sending some money to the tax pool. I mean, there was times where we used to get tax pool investments at 5%. You're probably getting 1 3/4 right now.
2.4.
Well, that's pretty good. So, interest rates have come down very dramatically over the last 3 years. 10 years ago, we were selling tax-exempt bonds for Schertz and Selma at 4.5%. So we're still historically very competitive interest rates. And I would like to think that in about 5 years, with this type of value, when you start getting up to $200, $250 million taxable value, you start looking to get into the ratings, and you'd fall into the A category.
Does your service have a fee also?
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't do things pro bono. Our fee is a percentage of the borrowing, and it's bond counsel also, and roughly on $1 million, the total fees is about 5%. As you get to this $24 million, the total fees are less than 0.75%. Still a big number, but those are on a sliding scale. It typically, our base fee is $5,000, and it's $10 per thousand for the first 500, then it drops to $5 per thousand for the next 500, and it keeps escalating down. So on $1 million, it's going to be roughly for everything, all inclusive, probably 35 to 50,000, depending if we have to buy or pay for the purchaser's lawyers to look at it. Because the purchasers, the banks that buy this, Frost Bank, if they would be a buyer of it, they have to pay an attorney to review the legal documents to make sure this is protecting them.
And you're talking about general obligation bond for that fee, yes?
I'm talking general obligation, COs, tax, all of it.
Okay.
If you have a bond election, that, again, that's part of that 15,000 that is in that, roughly speaking, 50,000. A CO for $1 million would be roughly 35,000. There's the benchmark 15,000 to cover the
Right.
bond attorney. Like I said, we're not bond attorneys. The two big bond attorneys in San Antonio, three big bond attorneys is Norton Rose Fulbright, Bracewell, who and McCall Parkers and Horton. Bracewell actually has their lawyer living, it's not 3009, that's Schertz, 319? Right on the way to 281 in Pleasanton. Just one or two more exits, County Road. There's the grass farm on that road. I can't think of it. It's like, it's in Atascosa County, but it's on the Bear County line.
530 something?
See, that may be it.
I think it's a
536.
300. It's a 300.
How long is this?
And it goes to Verde. It cuts right into.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking
Verde.
How long is he gonna talk?
I'm done.
If-
Well, but I'm here as long as they want me to talk.
Well,
If, the-
we wanna do city business. You already sold your financing thing.
wait, I just have a question on, if
Yes,
the
ma'am.
city issues debt just for street, just for street repairs, and say it's like $1 million, what is the scope that the city can use that, I guess in the time frame? Is that something that could be over a 10 or 15-year period, or is it
No.
a one-shot?
If you sell them, and you'd want to sell them all, you will be telling in a certificate that you're planning to spend the money within 3 years. And it's a plan. Now, you will be a small issuer exemption, where if Schertz borrows the money, they're outside of the small issuer exemption. 5 million and less. So the IRS will never come down and knock on your doors and say, have you spent all your money? We're in year 5, because you're the small issuer exemption. But you'll sign a certificate that says we're going to attempt to sell things spend it all within 3 years. And it's 85% within 3 years.
Okay, and what if money that doesn't go spent, or what if it's unspent?
That's why I say you're under a small issuer, no one's going to come back and knock on your door. But, I do want to, the law says you do it, you're going to attempt to do it within 3 years. If you have money left over and you just say, the future council says, we don't want to spend any more for streets, you can use it to pay off the debt. But I think there's always streets, if you have plans, there's always going to be improvements for streets. And typically, the projects would be defined as streets and curbs and gutters and drainage incidental to the streets. Not drainage, for a slough through town. It's drainage incidental to the streets, bar ditches.
Okay.
And if I may, I have been working with the engineer and in talking to him for $750,000, you can bring all the streets in this city up to good to excellent condition. The map that you saw before that rated them in the 4 categories, you only have 2.
So if it is something like 750, is that worth going out for like a bond election, or what is,
Well.
for streets, and if that's what it is?
Okay, that's going to be a political question, and
Okay.
it's a good question to ask. $15,000 divided by $750,000 is a lot of money for an election. $15,000 for a $24 million election is not much money. You're not spreading it over a lot. But you're now taking the choice from the citizen, the direct choice. So that's going to be, you know, what are you comfortable with? I don't like adding on costs, so I would say, let's try to do it on a CO, but that may be something that the voters don't want us to do, and we're not even going to approach that. That's a business decision that I can't advise you on. It's a good question to ask, and it's an important question, but $15,000 is a lot of money, because that's coming out of your bond proceeds. So if it's $750 that you need, then you're borrowing, you know, then you have to ask for $15,000 more just to cover the cost of the election.
But wouldn't we just do this during the November election? It would be included during the general election? We have to call a special election for this?
Well, it depends. If you do the general obligation, then yes, it definitely goes on the ballot. If you do what is it?
CO, certificate of obligation.
Certificate of obligation, it may or may not, but there wouldn't be the bond,
The extra cost.
the extra cost to do it that way.
And the attorneys are going to be working probably with you. You're the city attorney, right? And are likely, if it's tied into already a city election, ballots already, you know, we already have judges, we already know where all of that is, they may be able to do it for less money. It's hard for me to quote what the attorneys are going to do.
Right.
I've seen them being willing to work on a joint election. But they have to do a lot more work for an election than they do a
Right.
certificate of obligation.
Okay,
Just to let you know, if you do an election, if you move down the path and you don't borrow the money from either a failed election, you don't owe us anything. The attorneys do charge time. We get paid when and if you all sell and borrow money.
okay. And one of the reasons Ken and I have been having this conversation to begin with has to do with what the legislature just passed with the 3.5% rollback. That's going to hurt us in the future. The fact that we are growing, we're having a tremendous growth, and what's happening is our rollback
It's getting lower.
keeps getting lower. And that's a challenge when we have a number of projects that need to be done. We have some drainage, we have the Hilltop Peaks Loman drainage project that we've had kind of on the radar screen, but trying to fund that one, that's just one of many projects. So kind of having this discussion on what other options we may have available. Now, you heard the discussion earlier about the eliminating the MTA tax.
Love
But we could utilize those funds in some fashion, perhaps,
Not
to
for the bonds.
not for,
A sales tax, either through the Economic Development Corporation and/or if you do street repairs. Street repair tax cannot be used for bonds. Can't. It has to be a pay-as-you-go. That's the $35,000 that will grow. For economic development, you cannot pledge taxes for an economic development project. So you could do, if you had a piece of land that you wanted to do a street to, that would open up part of the city, that would be a general street. That wouldn't be directly economic development. The benefit of building that street opens up the part of town for economic development.
right,
But if you wanted a business to come in and we're going to buy that building and let you move in, you can't use ad valorem taxes at all without an election.
okay.
So those are things that you just have to be careful with the economic development tax and with the sales tax. They can
Okay.
cross mingle, except the sales tax for street repairs cannot commingle.
Okay,
They can't cross.
so, but in this case, we would have, so the MTA would basically go back into our general fund? No,
You have to have a election for that half cent.
correct,
So then, depending what it is, there is crime control, which can help fund crime, a policeman, police
we
vehicle.
don't want to fund crime,
Fund, yes.
crime prevention.
Crime prevention. There's a sales tax for economic development, sales tax for street repairs, where was I? There's sales tax for city-owned emergency facilities. All of those can, but that sales tax has to be really earmarked to where it's going. It can't go to the general fund. It can be, it really will have its own, probably, sub-fund in the audit.
Got it, okay. And so then a CO would be part of our INS, so we'd have our,
Yes.
where I was going with that is they would be separate because if we abolish the MTA, that goes into the M&O piece.
If
No.
you abolish the, okay, so if all of a sudden you get, you abolish it, now you're down to 7 3/4 sales tax.
Right,
You have to have that election, and depending on what it's for, and it can be multiple, but that will go into a separate fund. So you change it to street repairs. It will go to a street repair fund, not the general fund.
okay,
However, that money that's being used out of the general fund for street repairs is not being used for street repairs anymore because you have the street repair fund.
right,
It's a left pocket, right pocket deal.
right.
I have a question. So during the election is when you vote for abolishing the tax, but you're also voting for where it's going at the same time?
You can, and if you're going to abolish the tax and you know what you want to have it, you would want,
To put that
you'd
on
want
there.
that second item there.
Right.
It doesn't have to happen. You could lower the tax to 7 3/4 and then in May have an election to pick it back up. But you have to be prepared for other entities that see, well, there's a half-cent sales tax that's available, we're going to get it. And they create a district, a emergency service district to pick it up.
We have one and they're doing that.
So, I mean, that's the risk that you pay.
Right.
Or that you run if you reduce it, because it's now maxed. Now it's maxed. Then it's
Right.
not maxed. Someone else could get there before you.
Okay,
I will point out one last thing, unless there's more questions, and you brought it up on the truth in taxation. If you get this 20% growth, 18%, that your preliminary numbers that you gave me, your M&O tax rate is going to be forced down on the effective rate.
I know,
I would encourage you, regardless of what you do on the INS side, if you issue bonds at all, get your 8% that the state's allowing this year up to the rollback rate. It may not be far off from where it currently is. If you gain 20% or nearly 20%, you're likely to lose 4 pennies.
well, there's other components
That's
to all of
new
that.
construction versus revaluation.
Well,
yes.
not only that, but also sales tax. So
Mhm.
our sales tax is growing astronomically.
Is your sales tax for property tax relief?
No.
Well, then it won't affect your M&O tax.
Is it, Ken? Sales tax for property tax relief?
You have a 1 cent sales tax that goes to your general fund. You have 2 half-cent taxes available. One I heard was the MTA. I don't know what the other half cent's for.
From the 2014, I think that went to streets. I think that's what that was for.
If it's streets, you're likely not able to have a second street sales tax. So if
We'll have
something-
to go back and look and see.
Something to look at, but you're maxed at 8 1/4. 1 cent goes to the general fund, but it's not tied to property tax relief.
Okay,
So your M&O is going to
You have
drop
that.
probably by roughly 4 cents, 3 or 4 cents, and then
No.
the 8%
The letter.
increase will get you up maybe 2 cents. So,
yeah, that one.
um,
So 1% local city sales and use tax, and an additional 0.5% city sales and use tax as permitted. Okay, 1% local. I thought on here it told us exactly what it was. Nope, that did not. Okay, sorry about that. I think we did do streets as part of that.
and so, I mean, that's all stuff is
That was on
we
the
can
ballot.
work out through the.
On the ballot
process.
order, it was streets. Yeah. Okay,
So
so that's, go ahead.
If we would decide to do the certificate of obligation for 800 or $1 million, we couldn't put it on the November election?
Well, if you did on the November election, then it's a general obligation bond. It's either or. If you do an election, it's a general obligation bond.
No, you talked about referendum.
Well-
like, so we could put it on there.
You could put it on there and it would be a GO bond. There'd be no reason to make it a CO anymore. If you call an election,
I see what you're
it's a
saying.
GO. If the voters referendum to you, it's a CO that turns into a GO.
Got it. Then we have the fees that are,
Because you have
okay,
an election now.
exactly.
We wouldn't have to do the election if we just said we're not gonna do it, right?
Correct.
Okay. So we saved the 15,000.
Right. But what he was saying earlier is on the CO, if the council voted to do this, then the voters could come back and say, no, we don't want you to do that. And then we would have
Then it
to
would go to
put,
election.
And we do, it'd be the
but
same
would
thing
we
do
have to go to
special
election?
Well, you could say, we're not going to do the
Oh, got
project.
it. Okay, that's.
You know, if you got
yeah.
25.
Oh, that's what I want to make sure.
If you got 25% petition saying that say, we don't want this,
Yeah, yeah,
then
Don't do it.
it's likely going to lose an election.
right.
If it's controversial, even at the cost, I'd suggest having the election. If it's not controversial,
Right.
if it was a city hall, do an election, because they're going to, we hear, it's a Taj Mahal, it's more than you
Right.
need, it's everything. If it's a necessity, if there's drainage, it's blowing out multiple houses every time it hard rain, maybe the voters should just do it and get it done.
Right.
Let's get it done now instead of having to wait till November. But those are all business decisions.
Right.
If it's political, we'd recommend not doing it as a CO. Take it to the voters, let the voters make the decision. If they turn it down, well, we're not going to get better roads for some time, at
Right.
least 2 years.
Right.
If they want it, they'll turn it, then it's $15,000 well spent.
Right. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
The rationale behind this is that if we continue on a cash basis, before you could redo the majority of the roads in this town of what we generate in a 1-year period of time, you're looking 15 to 20 years out before you could redo the road.
Right.
All
And
of
the roads have a 25-year
or
expected, so, okay. And that's what I was thinking, I mean, also talking about drainage, I mean, that's a problem. We have a few areas that we have just the one project I mentioned.
And I'll cite you one example. It won't apply here. But in Selma, Lookout Road was a 2-lane road with a low water crossing at the Cibolo Creek. We issued a much, much, much larger issuance for debt in order to do that. Before the project was completed, Benny Keith moved its entire warehouse distribution from off of Riddiman Road onto Lookout Road. Prior to that, O'Reilly's Auto Parts moved in a distribution center. Both of those places not only do wholesale, but they do retail. So, in the grand scheme of things, that investment has already paid itself back over thrice since the investment was made in the street.
So Mark, I do have another question for you then. Is there the ability to pay it off early without a penalty?
Typically, you go 10 years and you get a free call, meaning after 10 years, the investors will let you take it from them without paying a penalty. We have pushed that to 9 years, which is not a big number. If you wanted to say, let us pay it off after 7 years, typically it will cost you maybe 10 or 15 basis points. And the reason for that is we're going to see interest rates go higher. This is the investor. We're going to see interest rates go higher. Well, we're at a 4% interest rate. They're going to take it from me when it goes higher. I mean, they're going to pay it off so they can use that money and not have it go higher.
Got it.
And they can't reinvest it. And same on the opposite, going lower.
Okay.
They'll say, well, if it goes down to 2, you're going to pay it off because you can refund them. Or if you get a bond rating after 3 or 4 years and you can pay it off and you go from 4 to 2, well, you're going to pay them off and they're not going to be able to get that 4%. So they'll charge a little bit. That's part of the negotiation when you get into finding that bank that's going to buy them. We've had some banks say, give us 3 years and we won't charge you any penalty. We have some that say 10 years and we're not going longer than 15 years, but if you go 10 years, we'll let you pay it off free. If you want a 5-year call, it's going to cost you 15 basis points.
Okay, so
It's a negotiation.
it is a negotiation, okay.
So the working through it, the numbers you gave us, the procedures, works the same for general obligation as well as CFO?
The numbers on the tax rate, yes, those will be the same. The process to get to the bond sale is the difference. Once you get to the bond sale, it's the same process going forward. The election versus no election, waiting till November to have the election versus doing it in the next 90 days.
And so Ken, you're comfortable with what the engineering firm has given you for at the 750? So an 800,000 would be,
$750,000, you go from these colored streets to this.
yeah,
That's not doing anything outside the city limits for the gravel road,
right,
only inside the city limits.
okay. And of course, it takes time to do those, so the 3 years to kind of get all that done, okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Mark, I
It's a pleasure.
appreciate you
It was
coming
nice to
out.
be here, and you have a beautiful town.
Thank you, now that you've driven by, you got to stop this time.
Thank you.
See you all later.
Thank you. And so that was item 7. Right here, okay. So the agenda item reads presentation with possible discussion or action. So I'll leave it up to the council on if they want to have any additional discussion on that item or any action.
Well, I would like to see it go on the ballot so that the citizens can have the input. Everybody, it's all we're hearing is that citizens want input. If we do this without citizen input, the petition will surely have a petition come back. So I would think we just agree on an amount that we need and put it before the voters in November and do this via the general obligation bond.
So that would add, if you're saying 750 and he's saying 35 roughly for the fee, so the 800 would be about right if we went with the general obligation.
And 15,000
Well,
for
we wouldn't
the
even
election.
if we put it on the ballot, that we're already going to have an election, right?
True, but
we-
that's not what he was talking about. It's the bond attorneys. It's a
right.
different process,
Right.
and that's where those fees go.
Okay.
So to include that, if we need the 750 and we need 15 for the legal aspect, then yeah.
Plus
we
35. I mean, it could
yeah,
be-
we would, so we'd put it.
right at 8.
Rather than 50, if we had to call an election.
I think we could do 8.
If you go with the route of putting it on the ballot, you take the temperature of the city directly. In 30 years of issuing C of Os, I've only seen one that required going to the ballot. Now, here, you've done everything on a cash basis. Debt is, a bond is spelled B-A-D because it creates debt. But I would submit to you that there are a lot of households that do not work on a cash basis. They have a car note, they have a mortgage, they have whatever, an unexpected medical. A city is no different. We've got some very sick streets in this town. Doing them on a cash basis, in my view, is unacceptable because it'll be 15, 20 years out. This is a means towards an end to get good streets in this city and solve some of the drainage problems. But it's a personal issue. It's something every citizen in the town should have a say on. Long and the short of it, is it frivolous? No. Is it something that needed? Yes. But allow the citizens to decide.
Okay. So, what were you thinking, Alderman Tremblay?
Basically, that's, I mean, that's my thought. I don't know what the rest of the council feels, but I believe it should be done by a referendum. We put it on the ballot
Yeah.
in November.
I agree.
That way, like I say, if it's denied, if it's not approved, then we live with what we have for the next 2 years, and all we do, we just keep filling potholes.
Right.
Because we can't go in and repair streets and do major street, I won't say repairs, we're gonna be doing street
There's going to be some
replacements. We're gonna be
there's some
building
serious
streets. Exactly.
work that needs to be done, yes.
So if the voters turn it down, they would need to understand that it's their call. I mean, if that's what
Right.
it's gonna be. But I would move that we put on the November election referendum item approving general obligation bonds in the amount of $800,000 for street repairs.
I'll second.
And it also includes going down the sides of the street, the alligator, and you use this large rototiller, for lack of a better comparison. You put dry concrete in that and wet it down, and then that way it gives it a stable base. It won't totally preclude it from alligator, but it will be a lot longer lasting than if it was just another coat of oil and more gravel.
Protect the edges and kind of give you a solid surface
Right,
to
so
walk on.
our city engineer would get involved
Exactly.
and come up with a plan
Yeah.
where the resurfacing would be done. So that's what we're talking about is resurfacing rather than repairing or potholes.
Exactly. Okay, so we have a motion by Alderman Tremblay with a second by Alderman Rapino to place general obligation bond on the November ballot for $800,000. Is that correct? Can I get a show of hands who would be in favor of that? And that is unanimous. Okay. So let's move back up to item 7A. Discuss and or possible action on the Lost Hills Low Water Crossing task order from M&S Engineering. So this is the area that we've already had the engineering work done. The council has been talking about this for a while. And approved actually getting the work done. And so for those who are not aware, if you go down Copper Canyon at Lost Hills, there is there's a natural spring that runs through there, and you have Lost Hills and you have Grand Spring, and they do not connect because of this low water crossing. A year and a half ago, there was a snowstorm during the wintertime, December, around Christmas, and at just past Copper Canyon on Waterwood Pass, a live wire went down. And so there was a wire bouncing around, and it was catching things on fire, and it was pretty dangerous. And what we found from that was anyone who lived east of Copper Canyon, the only way to get in and out of there is Waterwood Pass. And we counted 193 properties at that time that were impacted by that. So this is a health and safety issue. This is something that needs to be addressed. We've done the engineering work. We have the money in the budget to do this. We will have to shift some monies around a little bit from some other areas, but we have the money available. And so I put this on the agenda so that we could finish what we started on this, address this one item that is health and safety related, and it would allow, it's a fairly short turnaround. In talking with Tom, I think he said it could be done probably before the end of the fiscal year, if not first part of the next fiscal year, but because the project would begin this year, all of that funding would flow back into, there'd be adjustments from the auditor to move it back into this year. They had, I was looking for my notes on that particular project, but they had presented 3 different designs on this. Here we go. I think there was it a 10-year, a 15, and a 25-year, something like that. I do not have that here. Catherine, did we not?
I printed out what was sent by, to me.
Okay.
Mayor,
Yes.
first one's 1 to 2 year. The second one is 10 to 10 year. I'm sorry, 2 to 10 year. And then the last bid is for 3 to 25, which takes into account a 100-year flood.
Right. And I don't have that particular document in front of me that had the designs, the drawings. I think everybody had a copy of that at one time.
I'm sure about that.
Yeah. And so, well, I have that. Oh, no, this is what I'm looking for. Right here. Okay. So we have the drawing here. They did the conceptual plans. They gave us an estimate here. The low end was $136,946. The next one, which is the 10-year, was $169,458.90. And the 25-year was $188,169.97. Somebody's phone is. And then there is an engineering, the actual project management portion. Now, we've already paid for the engineering design work that you have here. This has already been done and approved and paid for. There is a fee on top of this, which is the project management portion of this by the engineer to manage the project. $25,000, $22,000, somewhere in that area. Yeah. $22,500. Oh, perfect. Okay. So depending on which one of these designs, oh, and we can call, I forgot, Gary Freeland, I think is his name. If we need to call the engineer, I can call and add him on the phone. He's happy to talk and answer questions if needed. Nobody? Okay.
When we talk about these, they're 1 to 2 years, these are their, to be like, their guarantees, warranties?
No. These had to do with the flood possibility, if I'm not mistaken. They would be built to withstand.
It's like a 100-year flood or a 50-year flood, or is that what you're talking about now?
Yeah.
Like, this would handle anything from 2 to 10 years based on statistics.
Exactly.
If you go on the low end, is there a possibility to be washed out?
It could.
It could be,
That's the point.
depending on
Yeah, I
if
mean,
there
that would-
was.
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
The difference in price between the mid and the high is 188 and the mid is let's say 170. So we're talking $18,000 and gaining 15 years, which seems like kind of a no-brainer. Now, the other thing to consider is that we do have an investor and a developer who is wanting to develop the property that's at the end of Waterwood Pass, the original plat that was filed. That's going to add 72 additional properties. So you would have to add those 72 to the 100 and let's say 200 properties. And that 193 that you and I talked about, that was just existing homes. That did not take into account any vacant lots
Right.
that may have been developed since then. So the number of people potentially impacted by this could continue to grow. So, if you went with the 25-year, kind of one and done. But so at 188 plus 22 puts us just around 210.
210.
Yeah.
211, rounded up. We actually have the money in the budget this year to do this project.
We have the money in the budget to do that, because we have monies that we can take from other places. We already had some of it set aside, the streets, because it is a street project. So we already had, I think we have 87 remaining there. But we have other monies that were over budgeted in other areas.
And so everyone on the council, if you're not familiar with this project, actually, we started this back right after Hurricane Harvey, trying to get our hands on Hurricane Harvey relief funds. Unfortunately, we didn't have our studies done in time, and so we were late to submit. But this is definitely a life and safety issue, being that the folks that live anywhere off of from Waterwood going on down into that area have no means of egress should there be a major catastrophe or a major issue in that area. So we need to think about the safety of those almost 200 families that live in that area. So that's just in case you don't remember the history of this project.
Yeah, when we found out about that funding, the very short window, yeah.
So I'll make a motion. I move that we approve 200 and cost not to exceed 200. I'd say 220,000.
Yeah, I was going to say.
These estimates were in December, so.
Right. So I'm saying
We've been
it's
in
gonna be a
contact
little
with
bit-
them, and
It's
they're.
gonna be a little bit more probably.
So I would say we approve funding not to exceed $220,000 for the Lost Hills
Low water.
water crossing.
Okay.
I'll second. Since it's a health and welfare issue. A lot of money.
So we have a motion by Alderman Tremblay and a second by Alderman Rapino to approve the Lost Hills Low Water Crossing task order from M&S Engineering not to exceed $220,000. And can I get a show of hands of those in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Ken, would you follow up with M&S tomorrow, and let's start that. Let's see what we need to do to get some bids going. And okay. Item 7B, discuss and or possible action on the purchase of a Pile Pro 8-channel wireless microphone system. So apparently you can't hear us, but we hear you. So this is something we've been talking about doing for some time, and Alderman Tremblay was able to come up with a solution that will, it's going to be, it's going to
Right,
auxiliary off this unit.
It'll just put this one output. All these 8 microphones will go into one input on the system we're using now. So we'll just
Perfect.
eliminate all these, and everyone should at the table here.
And they're all wireless. Yes.
Yes, all wireless.
Perfect.
We can
You know what
control
I
it
did?
from back here somewhere.
Yeah.
I have to make copies of the stands too.
Yeah, I think also we're looking
The
for
microphones
speaker
and
stands.
but
Oh,
I
for
put that
this,
on there.
right.
But those are only like $20.
Yeah, they weren't.
So we
just
can
the
do a not
same.
to exceed
Right.
number. So there's 2, 4, 6, 7. If we can ever get Ken at the table, that'd be 8. So, and this comes with 2, 4, 6, 8. Can't 8.
He won't need to be at the table.
Pardon?
Oh, if it's wireless,
He could
talk
be over
to
there. So this is something available on Amazon now. Something we could probably pick up fairly quickly and have it certainly by the next meeting.
Yes.
Okay?
I move that we purchase.
What was the question?
Are you buying this used or new?
No, it's new.
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 But I looked these up and read the reviews on this particular model, and Though it has 4 out of 5 stars, when you read the reviews, it's only like a 62% positive rating. And the biggest issue was static and interference.
And again, based on wireless products you're gonna have around, you can get static from cell phones. It's just hard to know what you're gonna pick it up from. I did audio stuff. That's what I did when I was working for the Army.
That's what I thought.
I can remember doing ceremonies in the quadrangle and picking up signals from trucks going down the highway, from construction going on across 35. It just depends what people are carrying. It's hard to tell.
So you looked up some other ones also?
I did
And this was the best one?
and then we started getting into high dollar stuff.
Did you look on eBay?
On eBay, most eBay stuff is used. I know you
Right.
do find some new stuff, but again, when you start talking wireless stuff, it gets expensive.
Well, you know, I buy from eBay. I don't really have a problem with anything I buy there.
Mhm.
And all of it is brand new.
So do you have a solution to offer on this?
We could check on eBay and see if we can find it for a lower cost.
I'm not so much worried about that.
It's only
The cost. I mean, this is a
$277. I
pretty
mean,
cheap
that's
item.
cheap.
I would be
Yeah.
concerned about how
I
good
mean,
it
we're already
is
doing
and the length of time it's going to work for us. That's what I would be
The
concerned
reason I looked at this one is because we already have a sound system with an amplifier. So this is basically it's a microphone system with a mixer. So we take one output from here and plug it right into that one. So we're eliminating, we started going with individual wireless microphones can run $1,000, $1,200 per microphone. Then you need a mixer to plug all of those into with cables and everything. You have pretty much everything you need here.
So this will
so
work
it-
with what we already have?
Right, we're just gonna plug this in, one cable goes from here into there, just like a microphone. You can control each microphone here independently. So you can set all the volumes and you have a master control you'll use on the amplifier down here. I mean, I looked at several, and I'm looking at, I wasn't looking at spending, I did get an estimate for doing a system in here and putting speakers in the ceiling. I think we were over $20,000.
Yeah.
So it's a low cost, and hopefully sure you're gonna have, you could get interference from any number of things. But you just keep your fingers crossed. I worked in audio for 30 years, so I know there's problems you can encounter. You can't, a lot of it you can't control.
Are you gonna get a protection plan with this?
Be warranty?
Yeah, it's got a protection plan in case something goes bad on it. It's like insurance.
I guess we could,
You
sure.
could do that. So you've got, like a 2-year protection plan is $27 plus it's, let's say $278 or $280. So it'd be just a little over $300 with the protection plan.
And again, anything with Amazon, if we get it and we're not happy with it,
Exactly.
we can return it. Amazon's great about returning stuff, so.
Right.
Motion to approve 300.
I guess.
Okay,
We need it, I guess.
anything else, Tony?
No, I'm fine. Go ahead.
I make a motion to approve the purchase of the Pile Pro 8-channel wireless microphone with a 2-year protection plan, not to exceed $300.
You're gonna exceed,
Yeah.
you're gonna exceed it already.
Okay, not to exceed $320.
Okay,
And you said 2-year protection?
yeah. Okay, we have a motion by Alderman Rapino to approve the purchase of the Pile Pro 8-channel wireless microphone system with a 2-year protection plan for a cost not to exceed $320. Can I get a second on that? Okay. That would be Alderman Thomasini. I want to make sure I don't call you the wrong name. Alderman Thomasini has seconded. Can I get a show of hands of those in favor? That's unanimous, okay. Okay, item 7C, discuss and or possible action on creating a part-time internal city auditor position, associated duties, salary, and work hours. So we recently had the audit completed that was presented at our last meeting, and there were some deficiencies noted, and it was suggested from the auditor that we have a part-time internal city auditor. So we have a candidate who actually approached us. They listened to the meeting, they heard what we needed, they reached out, so this looks like an easy one to resolve. And I would like to introduce Jennifer Maldonado Godoy. Is that correct? Did I say it right? Okay. Welcome.
Wait, are you on C or D? Are you taking them together?
I'm sorry?
Are you on C or D?
I am on C.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So we're going to have to take this in two parts. One is possible action on creating the position, and then the second part of that, or the next item, would be about the candidate for that. So, and Ken, can you explain kind of the responsibilities of the internal auditor?
If you all recall, when the CPA was out briefing the audit, he said that the requirements for the internal auditor would be someone who needed to add and subtract. By virtue of the work experience of this young lady, she has an associate's degree already. She works for a credit union, so numbers are her life. If we were to go out and hire, say, a retired or underemployed CPA to do this, we would be looking at a fee 4 to 5 times higher than what we would have to pay this young lady. She came to me after the last meeting and said, hey, I can add and I can subtract. And I said, well, this is almost too good to be true.
So what would be the responsibilities,
Twice to 3 times a month, she would come in and she would look over Catherine's shoulder and she would validate the work that Catherine does in the entries in the bank accounts, what to charge against what budget line. This would also take away one of the findings that we were given a little later in the agenda. You're going to see another action. There'll be another takeaway from one of the findings. And just for information's purposes, you'll also recall that they had 2 invoices that they said they couldn't find. Well, we have now located both invoices. What I hope to do in the sum of all this is to go back to him, show him the computer usage that is in the personnel policy manual, and we will have relieved all of the findings that they have.
okay.
This is just an integral part to that.
So it's not going to be reviewing every single trend, it's just going to be some sampling, basically?
Yes, same as they do.
Okay.
Nth item, you know, every 5th item that goes in, we'll set that parameter up later to meet the requirement. But essentially, it'll take away an adverse finding in the future.
Okay. And it was a deficiency noted
Yes,
in
ma'am.
our audit, so. So this particular discussion and action item is just the creating the part-time internal city auditor position, their associated duties, the salary, and the work hours. So that's what we're discussing here.
So do we have a worksheet? Do we have an idea what the duties are? I'd like to see the duties somehow involved
Job description.
preparing for the audit. If in fact she'll be the internal city auditor, she should have some responsibility or involvement in compiling the actual audit. We know what the requirements are for the audit. We have a checklist. Some of those things could just be getting compiled as we move along.
We never,
through the year.
well, the problem with taking that approach is we never know what the auditors, what their sampling is going to be. What are they going to be specifically looking at? We know overall, and that's, I think, what the position really is going to be about, is you have an invoice, Did it get signed off on? Was it approved by council? Did it fit, did you stay within the budget? Do you have all the receipts and signatures? That's one package, that's one sample. The other is looking at how Catherine is, like you said, looking over her shoulder. You have this expense and it's going to this line, is that the correct
So
line?
any of these issues that we're dealing with now with some cash refunds that there's no record of where the funds
Exactly.
went, those items will be things that you would be checking. Any
Those could be some of them.
reimbursements that are done?
Reimbursements?
Looking for some type of paper trail to show where those funds went, where and when.
But
Right.
Do we have a job description yet?
That's what
And
I'd
that's
like to
what
see, a
we
job
need to-
description, yeah.
Right.
Something that outlines, so that she'll know what she's going to do or whoever.
Right, we know it's a
we
matter,
hire.
it's a method of checks and balances. But
Okay, you're gonna
do we
do
in fact,
this,
do we
you're
in
gonna
fact
do
have
that.
a job
I gotta have a
description?
job description ready for your next meeting.
Okay,
Sounds good.
okay.
We can still establish the position.
So I'll take a motion on that one then.
Wait,
Oh.
can we do that if we don't know how many work hour, if we don't know the full job description, do we know the full amount of work hours that we're gonna give her and the salary we're gonna give her? Because that's part of that.
4 to 8 hours a month.
So you would
Wouldn't that be
approve,
dependent on-
not more than 8 hours a month?
I should think not.
So could we just include that in the job, in the position?
Sure.
Number of hours?
Well, that's what we were going
Right.
to do here. We were
So-
going to define their duties
Mhm.
and the salary and the time. You don't want to do that tonight. You want,
We can.
oh, okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
If you wanna take all the notes, but yeah, the duties will be to, in the first place, is to do random samples on, I know she's gonna come in bi-weekly? Or
As
monthly
time
basis?
allows, we're talking, what do you say, 4 to 8 hours a month.
Right.
It's not that much. My suggestion would be, these reconciliation reports are very helpful because
Mhm.
these show where the money has been spent. So she could randomly go, I want to see that item, So then she would go look and see how was it entered, where's all the backups, those type things.
So, on an average, how many transactions do we do
Oh.
monthly?
Catherine?
An
I've never
average,
counted them on average.
There's a lot.
I never-
would you say 30, 40?
A month? No.
Probably more, well, I've got transactions that go into the Chase credit card account in
Yeah.
QuickBooks, and then I've got transactions that go into the general fund account.
Yeah, let me look at the,
And they're both, just for 1 month.
And remember, we're doing this to meet a requirement of the audit.
right.
I would
But
say,
it's also, it means, like I said, checks and balances.
sure,
as well.
absolutely.
So let's say she does a minimum 10% random sampling
Mm-hmm.
of the monthly reconciliation report.
Okay.
Would that be adequate, 10%?
5.
5%?
5%, well, I'm just looking at here, it looked like there were, on this reconciliation, roughly 50 items. So if you did 10%, that's 5 items.
Okay.
So it's more than enough because the auditor himself, on an nth item, found 2 invoices
Right.
for a year.
Right, because they don't look at everything, they just
Oh, I know.
randomly,
And
they have their
normally inspectors
methodology.
are good at pulling the stuff that you don't have. I mean, I've been through so many inspector general inspections working for the Army, and they'll walk in the door once every couple of years, and they go right and pull the one file that you can't back up, you know?
Catherine,
All
do
right.
you have the ability in QuickBooks to see a count of transactions? Does it show you that?
An account of
Account.
transactions?
The number?
It can be in the job description, the percentage, it doesn't have to be.
I mean, we can go with a percentage, or we can go with a number.
I think a percentage is good because that way it's variable for slow and,
Month to month,
pardon?
month to month, because you'll have more transactions in this month. than
Exactly.
the next.
Right.
So if you use a 5%,
5 or 10?
I use 10.
10%.
10%.
On the credit card, I did about another 20 entries.
Okay.
on the Credit card, which is the last 2 pages of this reconciliation.
Okay.
It would take me some time to figure that out.
I'm sure that there's a way to do that. We can figure that out. Okay, so,
So do we need to verbally go through the whole thing, major duties to, or can we just say that's what we like? Because I can say, okay, the city auditor position's requirement is to internally audit a minimum of 10% of all transactions reconciled on a monthly basis.
mhm. Yeah, you could do that.
Which pretty much is the.
That is the
duty-
job
that's
description.
duties, yeah, I mean, it doesn't go much further now.
And then, so salary and work hours. So do you want to say, you know, not to exceed,
Number of hours.
10
should
hours a
not
month,
exceed,
or?
10%,
10 hours a month without prior approval of council.
not to exceed 10 hours without prior approval? Okay.
One other question, is this a city employee, or is this gonna be a contracted position?
It says internal city auditor, so therefore,
It would be a city.
but it would be part-time.
Part-time?
Mhm. So 10 hours a month, not to exceed without council approval.
What about salary now?
Okay,
In her resume, did she,
I do, but we can't talk about that till we finish this item.
well, I was just gonna ask if she had given a number of what she wanted.
I do not see that. So Ken, from your experience, what is a fair rate for that?
I'd say $15 an hour.
15 an hour?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
You paid more than that for counting baby shoes.
That's the way it works. Okay, so what we've come up with is to internally audit 10% of the monthly transactions with work hours not to exceed 10 hours per month. If they exceed that, it requires council approval at a rate of $15 an hour.
Within the duties, if you can add in their reports, findings to the city administrator.
And I think that would be reasonable to request some kind of report from those activities each month.
That should also be in there, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So,
Okay. Okay,
and again, I don't think this needs to be reported to the council every month. This is basically information
It's
that's
an
fed to
internal-
the city administrator for
Yeah.
his notes, as well as
Yes, I
for
may.
the mayor.
I think it'd go a long way with the auditors if in fact the report was issued to the council. That way, it's not going to, you know, this elderly guy that can't remember where he had lunch yesterday. But it will in fact go to all the council, and that way you have oversight through an agent that this work was checked.
You
Okay.
could be on the monthly reconciliation.
as part of, yeah, as part of the monthly report where we do expense and, we do that?
That works.
The revenue and expense?
Right,
Report findings
so-
to city council.
You know,
So the report will be-
Another auditor, and we don't need it.
Okay,
The audit findings will be reported to the city administrator, who will in turn give it to the city secretary.
Right.
To include in her monthly
Exactly.
report.
okay,
Okay.
okay. So would somebody like to make a motion on that one?
I move that we approve creating the position of part-time internal city auditor position with the duties, salary, and work hours as defined.
Okay,
I'll second.
so we have a motion by Alderman Tremblay and a second by Alderman Rapino to approve creating a part-time internal city auditor position. The position will review 10% of the monthly transactions and report findings in a report monthly to the city administrator. Work hours are not to exceed 10 hours per month. If they need to be more than 10, council will have to approve any additional time, and the rate will be at $15 per hour. Does that sound right? Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Can I get a show of hands of those in favor? All right, that's unanimous. Okay. Item 7D, discuss and/or possible action on the candidate's resume for part-time internal city auditor, the position and filling the position for the auditor. And again, we do have a candidate here who has, and you should all have a copy of, yes. Oh, I see some animal experience here.
Yeah, we cook us some hamburgers.
And again, the duties that are required are not tremendously complex. She has the experience in her current position to certainly take on this relatively,
Question, ma'am. Will this candidate be required to have a medical clearance?
medical
Will?
clearance?
Well,
I don't think so.
okay.
Catherine, did you have to have a medical clearance? Okay.
Just wondering.
I think we're good.
Okay.
We'll still have to go through the personal policy manual and sign. it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was gonna get with you on that one.
There is in the personal policy manual, a provision on outside employment that it can't be in conflict of interest or interfere with their job duties, but the council just needs to make a determination of that. If they're employed outside the city.
Oh,
So
got it.
that it does not create a conflict of interest or interferes with the job.
I move to nominate Jennifer Maldonado Godoy for the position of interim city auditor.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion by Alderman Tremblay and a second by Alderman Rapino to nominate Jennifer Maldonado Godoy, I always trouble that, for the position of the internal city auditor. Can I get a show of hands of those in favor? And that's unanimous.
I just
Welcome.
wondered why you didn't explore nursing. You have a degree.
So you will need to get with that gentleman there and Miss Catherine, and they'll get you all set up and ready to go. Okay. Item 7F, discuss and or possible action on amending resolution number 2017-75 regarding website policies and procedures. This is Alderman Rapino and Alderwoman Walker. And we are calling...
And really, the purpose of doing this is to allow more, Catherine gets bogged down a lot in her major, with a lot of other duties, and she is assigned to take care of the website, so allowing the mayor and the city administrator, I guess, to have input into the website is the major change we made to this resolution. So,
Yeah, and the challenge that I have is when I'm looking for something, or as evidenced by a previous meeting, when somebody asked a question, the data was not readily available on the website. That's nobody's fault. It is just it was a result of a transition from one platform to another platform. And so not every document, everything was loaded. And of course, sometimes you don't realize that until you're looking for it. So there's times that I'm at home in the evening working on things and I see something that's missing and I can't go in and fix it. So, and Catherine isn't at work and CJ's busy with other things. So it's just an opportunity to have another person who can help with making sure that the website's up to date and current and fixing links and addressing whatever may be missing that needs to be added. And you know, in the past I did do that. So, I mean, I have the experience to do it and I understand the reasons why the ordinance was put in place. I do understand that. So, this is just a means to kind of relax that a little bit.
So I'll move to accept resolution 2019-103 with the changes that have been made to it, or
So
the
add
changes that were added.
the one that's presented, as presented.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, so we have a motion by Alderman Rapino to accept the resolution as presented.
I second.
And we have a second by Alderman Walker. Can I get a show of hands of those in favor? So we had 4, and Alderman Garcia will abstain. So that motion carries. Okay. We're going to go to item 7H. Discuss and or possible action on an ordinance establishing percentage of uncollectible taxes. This is another deficiency noted in the audit. And it's been noted for 2 years that I know of. So this is, I'll let Ken explain this one because I know you worked on putting this together and there's a lot of numbers in here.
The auditor was of the opinion that we did not have a record of what percentage we would charge on delinquent ad valorem taxes. That was something that myself and the ladies that were here doing pip and shovel work had an issue with that. When I said, well, if it has been a past practice, does it need to be annotated and codified? Not thinking that in my years of being an auditor and now being a recovering auditor, that the answer to that was in the affirmative. So this document should put that to rest for the next time we go through an audit, that we not only have a penalty established, but it is codified in an ordinance.
So we've already been doing it, we just didn't have a,
It was a tremendous find.
Well, I know that we did have an ordinance that assessed an additional penalty, but it was a flat percentage.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now we're spreading it out. We're doing very similar to what Bear County does for the,
Odd how that mirrors that document.
that is odd how that works.
Yes, ma'am.
And these, these penalties, if you will, are assessed at the assessor's office. It's not something that we're doing outside. They do the assessment, they do the collection. We would provide this information to them. Okay. Okay. So, anyone have any other questions?
Move to approve ordinance number 2019-137. Ordinance of the City of Sandy Oaks establishing percentage of non-collectible taxes.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Alderman Tremblay and a second by Alderman Rapino to approve ordinance 2019-137 as presented. Can I get a show of hands of those who are in favor?
One more question.
Oh,
So
yes.
This right here, so whoever's delinquent in our city, the tax office is gonna be notified.
Bear County collects
No,
our
no, no,
taxes.
the assessor collector does
Yeah, I
all
know,
of that
but, I mean,
anyway.
Everybody that is behind on their taxes here in the city will be notified at the tax collector's office, correct?
Yes.
That's.
Mhm.
I just
Oh,
wanna-
They
yeah, we
collect our
don't do any of that
Yeah,
notification.
no, I just wanna make sure that,
Oh, okay,
yeah. Okay, go
okay.
ahead.
So again, can I get it, go ahead, yes?
Section 4 has 2017 as dates.
That's the auditor, that's the language that's the language the auditor
Because
asked
they
we
were
specifically
auditing
put in.
2017.
So we'll bring another one for 2018, and then when 2019 taxes are assessed in
So we need to
September,
redo
we'll-
it each
we're-
time.
I think every
Okay.
year.
That's what I was wondering.
Catherine, put that on your calendar for follow-up. So this one is specifically addressing the 2017.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's what it says.
Okay.
Okay. So, back to the question. Can I get a show of hands of those in favor? I have to look everywhere. Okay. That passes unanimous. Item 7I, we're going to pull. We're not quite ready for that just yet. Item 7J is discuss and or possible action on council nominating and confirming members for the Park Advisory Committee. So, if you remember correctly, we had I don't know if it was our last meeting or the meeting before
Last
that.
meeting.
It was the last meeting, okay. Where we talked about the Park Advisory Committee. And I think it was you who said that you didn't know that we could find anybody, and people,
That's great.
It was
Yeah,
good.
I was impressed.
so we had 6 people who had raised their hand, and I think they wrote their names down. Catherine, is that
Yeah,
correct?
We have
and then
the
I had
list.
someone approach me the
Okay.
other day.
Somebody else wants to be on there?
Yeah, sells insurance, Joe.
I saw that email.
Joe
Gutierrez.
Daniel
Gutierrez, yeah, it was, I think
So now
it's
we have
Joseph.
7.
Okay. Now, I did have one question. One of the names that's on here is also serving on the Planning and Zoning Commission. Is there a conflict, or is that okay? I mean, can they serve on 2 different?
I don't think that there would be a conflict.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure before anybody asks the question. Okay, so, can I make the nominations on this?
I think you make the nominations, then council would make the
Perfect. So we have 7 people now. Norma Graham, Ruth, I never can say her last name.
Carvajal.
Carvajal, John Crickmer, Charles Fillinger, Jennifer Maldonado Godoy, yay, Ann Garza, and Joseph Gutierrez. So that's the 7 who want to be on the park committee. So from the council, if y'all have any questions?
I'll make the motion that we have the committee and place these volunteers on the committee. Park.
The 7 names that
Yes.
we read off? Okay. So we have a motion by Alderman Tomasini to accept the nomination of the 7 names that were presented. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Alderman Rapino seconds. Can I get a show of hands of those in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Catherine, would you reach out to each of them and let them know that they have now been placed on that committee?
Should I, or should the chair? I can.
Oh, wait, did we have a chair?
when you
Oh,
do
wait,
that.
wait. You're right, hang on. Okay, the next item on the agenda is 7K. and that is discuss under possible action on council appointing a member from council to serve as chair and appoint a co-chair among the members of the Parks Advisory Committee. So one of these, I would recommend that we let the members decide who the co-chair is. That's just my recommendation. Is there anyone here on the council that would be willing to chair this committee? I hope we have more citizens who want to do it than council members.
Well, I guess I'll do it.
Okay, so Alderman,
Do it before you guys nominate.
I was gonna nominate Alderman Rapino to serve as the chair of the park committee.
okay. So Alderman Tremblay has nominated Alderman Rapino to be the chair,
Who volunteered before.
who volunteered before, yes. So can we get a second on that nomination?
I second.
Okay, Alderman Walker seconds. Can I get a show of hands of those in favor? And you don't have to vote.
I abstain.
Okay, we will say 4, and we will say that he has abstained. Okay. Okay, we have one more item here.
Oh, so about the co-chair, did you want to?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. So we need to talk about the co-chair.
Are you gonna call it?
As you are the chair now, would you like to make a motion as it relates to the co-chair from the members?
I'd like to talk to the members first before I do that. Do we have to make that motion, or can I just, I mean, do we have to decide that here, or can I just talk to them and then?
That could be your motion.
Yeah, make the motion for
I
you
make the
to...
motion that once I talk to the members of the park committee, that I'll give somebody the opportunity to volunteer. If not, I'll select somebody.
Okay.
I second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Alderman Rapino and a second by Alderman Walker to have the chair, Alderman Rapino, talk with the members of the committee and make a determination for the co-chair. Can I get a show of hands on that motion? All right, that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, now we can move on to the next item. Item 8A, discuss and or possible action on recruiting fosters and volunteers and creating a waiver form. I'm going to let Alderman Walker talk about this, as she is the chair of the Animal Control Advisory Committee.
Okay, the members of the Animal Control Advisory Committee have developed this animal rescue volunteer waiver form, and just bringing it to council to approve its use. You'll notice that the first page is basic collection of information. They need to sign the waiver, release, and indemnification and agreement, and the rules of conduct. The final page is just a copy for them to keep for their refrigerator.
For the refrigerator.
That's where all my stuff goes. Is there, we do know there's a couple of corrections that, typos, just typos on the second page, but are there any other content changes that need to be made?
I know that Cassandra had spent some time making some recommendations and notations on this, so those are all incorporated in here. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty much a,
It was pretty much copied from another organization.
Right.
And then Cassandra made her additions to it.
and we have people who have volunteered to step up and do fostering for some of the animals, which will be helpful. But also taking care when we get our kennel, our facility in, you know, they want to They want to go walk the dogs, they want to feed them, they want to, whatever they want to do. We really needed to have, the first page is their information, so we know who they are, but then we do talk about the waivers on just the risk and responsibilities here, like wearing closed-toed shoes and no dangly jewelry. Okay,
Is there any discussion, anything you see needs added?
you know, I think we're so new at this part of it, for right now, we really don't know, but as things come up, if something's identified, we always bring it back and change it if needed. And I would recommend that perhaps we put some kind of form number with a revision date on it, just so we know. Come up with some kind of naming convention that would be meaningful, so that we would know what version of the document we're being used. Okay. Can I get a motion on this one?
I'll make a motion to accept the, what do we call it, the animal
Volunteer application.
volunteer application form.
I second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Alderman Rapino and a second by Alderman Walker to accept the volunteer application form and waiver. Can I get a show of hands of all in favor? That is approved. And I'll entertain one more motion if anyone's interested.
We can cover I. You pulled H.
I pulled I,
You pulled I.
yes. H we did,
H we did.
yes.
That's right. Got them mixed up.
I move we adjourn.
Okay,
Then we'll adjourn.
it's 8:34 PM and we are adjourned. Thank you.